This is our one of our final panels for the day. This is what's so great about comics, and I figured most of you like comics, or else you wouldn't be here. But another thing about this panel is the idea of how do you get friends and family members, significant others involved in comics. It occupies a lot of our daily life. If you're anything like me, you want to share this with other people. So, well, what are some titles that you can introduce people to? It's not all superheroes. There's other things you can introduce to people. So we've got a couple people from local comic book stores who are going to fill you in on that, and also talk about other things that are going on in the industry right now, some current issues and topics. So without further ado, I'll let you all introduce yourselves.
I'm Scott Petitt.
Sure about that?
I reckon.
Dan Thompson.
Tory Whelan.
All right, well, I will turn it over to you guys and let you all run with the show.
Sure. So what's so great about comics? We're all here at a comic book convention, and there's been a lot of big movies still coming out. A really big one just came out a couple weeks ago, Superman or Man of Steel. And how long have comic books been around? Yeah, it seems to be a art form that has been around, gosh, really since the cavemen. I mean, like, archaeologists will go back and say there's like cave paintings where they would tell stories with pictures and whatnot. The Battle of Hastings, I think in 1066, I'm terrible with my dates, but there's tapestries that kind of drew out that battle. So it's kind of been in our DNA to tell stories with pictures. And I guess we can kind of start out like a brief history. Comics kind of originated in the late 1870s, or 1890s, 1870s, 1890s, something like that.
Somewhere around there.
I think you were reading them back then, weren't you?
Close. I was close.
And then, the 1920s, it started getting big, and we had, I want to say the first official comic book, at least that Overstreet recognizes, is Funnies on Parade, or Famous Funnies.
Yes.
And it was a little insert that they would put in boxes of shoes. So you buy your new shoes, and you get like a little comic book with it. And then it just kind of took off from there. And of course, in the 30s, gearing up for World War II, you had Schuster and Siegel created Superman. Of course, Bob Kane created Batman. And then Kirby and Simon created Captain America, who famously punched Hitler on the first cover of the book.
Right.
And we kind of went from there. And then after World War II ended and all the kind of war propaganda comics kind of died off, you had a big push with like westerns and horror comics, romance comics. Like people will come in the shop and they'll be like, really romance comics? Oh yeah, it was like, will Tina get the date tonight or something? And there's this picture of this girl pining for some guy that looked like the guy from Mad Men.
Young romance.
Yeah, young romance, stuff like that. Just kind of funny stuff like that. And then superheroes were kind of like the minority of comic books back then. And then you had in the 1950s, going in the late 50s, you had a horrible person come up with a book called Seduction of the Innocent, which said that comic books were turning people into, or kids, into vile, evil people. And another example that not much has changed in our country's government, Congress didn't have anything better to do but almost outlaw comic books.
But that was all with the Red Scare, too.
Yeah, it's part of the Red Scare, too.
Yeah.
So the comic book companies came up with a comics code where it would kind of regulate itself so the government or state agencies wouldn't interfere and comics could still be produced. And then you had kind of superheroes benefited from that, but it wasn't really till the 60s when Stan Lee kind of created Fantastic Four and Spider-Man and kind of created the Marvel Universe, which Spider-Man is right there, and another Spider-Man.
Right.
You guys look good for your age under that mask, hopefully.
Right. And in shape.
Yeah, and in shape, That Spidey doesn't talk, I don't guess.
It's okay.
Sorry, I might be his clone. Don't be ashamed of being a clone, man. It's all good.
Right. They should have kept Ben Reilly around here.
But get into the 60s, kind of kicked off the superhero genre. Of course, Justice League was around before the 60s. I think like the late 50s, or what was it?
Yeah, but it was more when Marvel hit with Amazing Spider-Man,
Sure.
Fantastic Four, X-Men, that superheroes started, hey, these are cool again.
Oh yeah. So of course you had like two major companies at the time, DC. That wasn't us. Or was that your phone? Did you turn your phone off?
It was vibrating.
We apologize about that.
I should have
She had like Marvel and DC, so DC had Justice League, Marvel came up with Avengers. DC had Teen Titans, and then X-Men was created, in the 60s and all that. And Marvel kind of took it in a different route where they tried to tie it in with a lot of the social ills of the day. Like the X-Men were kind of synonymous with the civil rights movement. Or if you really read into those early books, it's, it's racial tension is basically all it is. And then Marvel's kind of always trying to be keep up with the times, and DC's a little bit too. Of course, the famous issue where Green Arrow walks in on Speedy doing heroin,
right?
Kind of talked about drug use and it's not good to use drugs and that sort of thing. Then the 80s and 90s, and it seemed like the 80s there was a big focus on licensed properties.
Oversaturation of stuff, really.
Yeah, like in the 80s. Of course, last year Larry Hamill was here and authored one of the hottest books in the 80s, G.I. Joe. And then a lot of licensed books kind of saved Marvel, starting in the late 70s with like Star Wars and that sort of thing. And we're not going to bring up My Little Pony. Do we have any bronies in the room by chance?
I don't get it.
Of course, the guy in the Canadian outfit would say he's a brony. And then of course the 90s Death of Superman and all the various different covers of Glow in the Dark, and obviously put a lot of kids through college.
Right.
And then here lately it seems that, I don't know, around 2001, 2002, you kind of had the 80s revival where companies brought back properties like G.I. Joe, He-Man, Transformers, that sort of thing. And then like Marvel and DC, you kind of had the emergence of Brian Michael Bendis and Mark Millar, and the DC Jeff Johns and Grant Morrison. Of course, Morrison had been doing comics for quite a while, and
right.
all those guys. But it kind of put a refocus on quality of the superheroes. Seems like we go in this cycle every 8 years where, like right now, to me, everything that's going out is pretty good. Where 2 years ago, you couldn't really say that. It's kind of like, yeah, this book's good. I buy this because it's the character I've been buying for years. But it's like every 8 years, we go through this cycle or so where it's almost like they read our minds and like, yeah, we're going to put this out in the book. I'm like, wow, this is exactly what I want,
Which Marvel has actually done a whole, not really a reboot, but a whole super change in their company after, I guess, Disney buying it, coming from a company that was, 5 or 6 years ago, going bankrupt.
That was about 10 years ago.
About 10 years ago?
Yeah, they got out of it about 10.
Yeah, and now they're like, if you pick up a Marvel book, you shouldn't really be disappointed. There's probably a couple out there that aren't good. I don't read those. But as far as anywhere else you go, like all new X-Men, I didn't think there'd be a day that I would think that X-Men was a good book again. Or even Spider-Man. No offense, Spider-Man.
Wait a minute, we got to clarify. The Spider-Mans are in the room. Are you Peter Parker or Doc Ock?
Yeah.
Definitely Peter here.
Okay. Peter.
Oh, okay.
Okay, that's cool.
Please don't be offended.
I really enjoy Superior Spider-Man, though. I gotta say, it's
Spoiler alert if you've not been reading it.
right. If you haven't been reading it,
12 issues.
sorry, I do totally apologize. But it's a good book. It's got me reading Spider-Man again. If you know where you go back to when Straczynski was writing it, and Gwen Stacy slept with Norman Osborn, and they had 2 twins, which I don't see Gwen Stacy sleeping with Norman Osborn at all. So anyway, but let's get away from that.
Not that good.
Because we're talking about what's good in comics. What's good in comics is after that, with Norman Osborn and Gwen Stacy, I sold every bit of Amazing Spider-Man I had, and I collected it probably 25 to 30 years. I mean, I guess being too overcritical of a fan or whatever, but it actually got me reading the book again, and I enjoy it. I'm having fun. So that's what's good about comics, is you can totally change it, come up with this unrealistic way of explaining anything. Oh, well, that's cool.
And there's always a debate about it every next Wednesday.
Oh, always an argument about it.
Book comes out this week. 2 weeks from now, we'll be talking about it.
Exactly. That's some of the good things about comics.
Oh, yeah.
And,
Well, go
and
ahead.
like Dan said, they're just putting out a ton of stuff right now, and Marvel just recently restarted, and DC restarted 2 years ago now.
2 years ago, September.
Yeah, and so they're about to start a whole bunch of new storylines, and they also just put out 2 new main books, Batman, Superman, and Superman Unchained. And from what I'm hearing, those are all fantastic.
Unchained's good. Scott Snyder writes that. He writes American Vampire and Batman as well, and he's done some other stuff. He's doing The Wake.
The Wake, which has been
with-
fantastic.
Yeah, with
Vertigo's
Sean
back,
Murphy.
and they're putting out a lot more stuff recently. They restarted Astro City. They've started a new 100 Bullets series. They're doing The Wake with Scott Snyder. They're doing Trillium, which is like a love story based on 2,000 years apart. People fall in love. They've got some really cool stuff going on right now.
Yeah, and it's what's cool about comics is you can go anywhere and just find about anything you want. If you want true crime, or if you want, you know, your superhero thing. Which I'm 41 and I've been collecting since I've been reading since I was probably 8 or 9. Seriously collecting when I was 11, and after that long a period of time, you kind of get burnt out on guys with tights and running around, and you know what I mean.
How can you ever get burned out on guys with
Well,
tights?
you don't necessarily get burned out, but you kind of get. It's the same thing.
It's
You know,
like true.
honestly, at the end of the day, you know Spider-Man's not going to die. Batman's not going to die. Superman's not going to die because of their own properties. They're immortal. They're gonna live longer than any of us in this room. That's just a fact. So it's good to go to Independence and read the stuff where these guys started, because it's what they really want to tell. And you get that self-contained story, and there's not a part 2 or a part 3 unless they make movies or a TV show, I guess. But
Isn't it amazing that this year is Superman's 75th year anniversary, and he's still relevant? We're still talking about him.
right, exactly.
Batman's like next year or 2 years after that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just amazing. You know, like it was a couple of years ago. I always tell this story to people. There was an older gentleman, he was about 84, came in the shop, and this is when Marvel was doing their 70th anniversary, really dating back to when they were called Timely Comics, back when they were doing all the war books and stuff. And they put out a lot of reprints of like Marvel Comics #1, Human Torch #1, Captain America Comics #1. And this older gentleman comes in, and he's just kind of looking at them. And I said, you know, hey, how's it going? Can I help you find anything? He's like, oh, I'm just looking at these. And he goes, is Captain America still relevant? And I was like, oh, yeah, you know. And it's like, did you ever read it? He goes, oh, I used to read it. I read these when they were brand new. So here I am having this conversation with a guy who's like 50 years older than me. And we're talking about comics. And he's having a good time, and I'm having a good time. And, you know, I'm telling him what's going on with Bucky's Captain America. And they're getting ready to switch it back and this and that. And he's like, oh, that's really cool. I thought he died. And went through that whole long story how he didn't really die and all that. And just had a good conversation. He left smiling, and I was standing there smiling. And that's the cool thing about comics. The absolute cool thing about comics. Of course, it's all over the world now. It should be. But it's a very unique American thing. It doesn't matter like what race you are, how old you are, who you voted for, what your religion, or how much money you make. There's a certain commonality in all these characters. Like there's an inherent goodness in all of it. Like one of the coolest things somebody ever said to me when I first bought my store was they walked around and said, this is really cool. And they said, you know what, you have a very big responsibility. And I said, oh, believe me, I got a bank loan and employees and all that. And they're like, no, it goes beyond all that. They said, look at your wall there, and all those cool characters have been around for years and years and years. You have a responsibility to pass this on to another generation. They can't die off with you or guys your age or girls your age or anything like that. And that's really true. And, you know, if you think about it, God bless, 75 years, people are still talking about Superman. And probably 75 years from now, they still will. And, of course, Batman and Cap and Spidey and all that. And it's just, there's something good about that. You know, and it's like, I sometimes sit back and look at the wall, and it's like, we got crime books, horror books, like Walking Dead, you know, 100 Bullets, superhero stuff. Don't think we have any romance stuff, but, you know, it's kind of in some of the books.
It's in there somewhere.
But, you know, it's all good stuff. And that's, you know, you talk about it, and he and I will start talking, and it's like we're little kids again or something. It's really ridiculous. And he's a lot older than me. I turned 20 at the end of the year, and I've been reading books for 30 years. But, you know, I turned 20, so we got a good age difference, so we can talk comics, you know?
Right. Good age. Yeah. But, like, the companies will go through, of course, you've seen the reboots with the New 52. Marvel's done theirs. Of course, we've had before that Crisis of Infinite Earths. You've had Infinity Crisis. This, of course, is at DC. But it's kind of upsetting when they do reboots. But it's a good thing too, because when they do the reboots, they're purposely kind of updating it and modernizing it at the same time, where it's approachable for an 11-year-old or a 10-year-old to come in and know who Batman, or a 20-year-old who hasn't, you know, I couldn't tell you how many times I've had people come in, well, I haven't been in comics for 15 years, so what's going on? Well, it's been 15 years. There's a lot that's gone on. You know, character could have died 5 or 6 times and come back, depending on who wants to write the character. And so once you get the initial reboot, and I personally don't really care for them. They kind of upset me. But again, I've been reading comics for a long time. It's kind of a no-brainer to know who Batman is and Green Lantern, and but as far as reboot goes.
One of the things we try to touch on in the shop sometimes with people, we have, like who in here reads Batman? All right, who here loves it? Raise your other hand. And who here is telling people about it that don't read comics? See, that's the key. And we talked about this. We did a panel last year. We kind of brought this up. How do I get my friend at work who doesn't read Batman to read Batman? Okay, well, in case you don't know, a guy named Scott Snyder writes Batman, and he's a really, really great writer. He's kind of like this decade's Jeff Johns. Like every decade, there seems to be some hot writer. Like last decade, it was Mendez for Marvel. This decade is Jonathan Hickman. DC Jeff Johns. Now Scott Snyder. Well, okay, you go to work and like, hey man, you gonna go see Dark Knight Rises? I know you like the movies, right?
Right.
Yeah, well, man, you ought to come check out the comic. Right. Well, I don't read comics. Man, if you like the movies, this comic has kind of that feel. And you can jump in. It's not going to be, well, God, I don't know, 75 years of history and who Batman dated and when he died and came back and all. No, you don't need to know all that. It's really fresh and clean. You just get in there. The art's good. The story's good. It's really well done. Cool. And I know you like Stephen King, and Scott Snyder and Stephen King did a comic called American Vampire. Oh, wow, that's cool. Yeah, just go to any comic shop, check it out. Look it up online, Then that way you got somebody coming in looking for 2 books. They get those. Man, I really like American Vampire and Batman. Does this guy write anything else? Well, yeah, he wrote he wrote Swamp Thing. Now he's got a solo book called The Wake, and then he's writing Superman Unchained. Well, sign me up. Let me get those. So there are ways to get people into it. And you can't force it on them. You just got to suggest it and, kind of relate it to something they understand, like movies.
Yeah, if they're interested in it, of course, with the social network that we have now, you can post stuff on their Facebook page.
Oh, yeah.
A picture or anything. I do it to my brother all the time. He loves Superman, so I always post pictures of Batman knocking Superman out with the kryptonite ring, and he gets mad, but he got me to read comics because he's 5 years old. Sorry for the Superman fans, I apologize. When I was younger, my brother got me into comics because he always had them around his room. And then, of course, this is the 80s, and this is when the Commodore 64 came around. He got into computers. He didn't care about comics anymore, so I got his comics, and I started reading them. Well, that's when I was introduced to Watchmen. And that's the first time I ever sat down and read Watchmen by Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons, and it totally changed the way I did look at comics, because I was always made fun of when we went to get comics. I was on a military base, not so much on the military base, because you go to the PX and the military guys would read comics. And it was cool, but after my dad retired from the military and we moved back to Kentucky, I was 13, so I had to go to 3 different places to get comics. If we came to Louisville, it was maybe once a month. So I'd have to collect all these. I'd get made fun of in school. All my friends would picked on me.
It's only because you wore the Night Owl costume.
Right, that too.
And no, in the comics, it was the costume you wore.
It was a constant dumb down of comics that they were, oh, well, this is just something that kids do. And just to dumb it down is just an insult, because it's an art form. First and foremost is an art form. And you look at a book or a comic book, you look at a picture and you're looking at the written word. Well, one side of your brain processes pictures, the other side processes the written word. So you're actually using the most potential of your brain when you're reading a comic book. So next time somebody dumbs down your comics, throw that in their face, because that's always a good one.
Amen.
Thank you. But to interrupt, sorry, I know I'm probably interrupting one of you all.
Pulling a Kanye?
Yeah. I'll let you get to what you got to say, but I got to do this first. What I do is I'll go to half price books. And I go through the quarter section, because I have friends at my other job that they're always like, well, my son's into Batman or Spider-Man. So I look for like the all ages stuff. I usually keep a stack at home now, and it's full of like Spider-Man stuff that they can read, Batman stuff. And so whenever a parent comes around and says, well, my kid really likes Batman or whatever, and he watches a cartoon, do you have any comics? I always have a stack that I can walk up and bam. And plus I do have a customer too. I mean, that sounds bad to say, but they're like, well, where's your store out? Give them a card, and they usually end up coming up and bringing their kids up. But it's a good way to introduce kids to comics, because I don't know as far as girls, but with guys, when we'll read comics up till we hit about 15 or 16 and then, or 14 until we discover girls. Then our money goes to girls and we walk away from comics until we hit about 24 or 25. Then we come back and we bring our girl and go, check this out. And I've had guys that came in the store and they're 10 or 11 and now some of them are graduated college. They still come in there. That's the coolest part to see about it, is
Makes
that
you feel old too.
even being like, it makes you feel old, but being like a clerk, if you want to put it. And, I'm sure I've insulted some people sometimes, not meaning to, and meaning to, but they still come back, whatever.
I was scratching my neck.
But, as far as what's good in comics, Jonathan Hickman is good in comics, if you know who that writer is. And he started out at Image. He's done a book called Transhuman, Red Mass of Mars, Pax Romana, Manhattan Projects, which is an ongoing through Image, which is excellent. Secrets is good. East of West, and then one of my favorites, which is Nightly News. And if you have not read that book, try to find that. The graphic novel you can find at our local stores. It's really good stuff. He does superhero stuff, but he also does just like, his own kind of thing. Nightly News is basically when the media smears you so bad and you haven't done anything wrong, but they don't retract the statement and they've ruined your life. And this guy comes up and these people are homeless, and then he starts this group up and he calls himself the Voice and they're the Hand. Well, out in New York, the people are going wrong, somebody gets shot, and as the media people are coming up, they're shooting the reporters. So that's the story of Nightly News. It's actually a really good story. It's like, how far do we let the media do things to us before we start saying something back? It's actually really good. Go ahead.
Shooting them with a camera or with a gun?
With a gun.
Okay.
And once again, it's more to it than just that, the whole story, but it is a really good story.
Yeah, Jonathan Hickman's a prime example of like what's so great about comics right now. All the indie stuff that Petitt was talking about, he's genius.
He's excellent.
He's one of these writers that he's the current writer of Avengers and a book called New Avengers. And of course, Avengers, everybody thinks the movie, and it's got all that cast in it. It has a lot of other characters, and he layers his stories. So like you can go in, read one of his books, and be like, well, what just happened? And then you read it again, you're like, I get it. And then each story is kind of like its own story, but if you read like 12 of them in a row, you start to see patterns. And he's really fun to write. He did a lot of his indie stuff, and Brian Michael Bendis kind of brought him into Marvel, and they did a book, kind of co-authored a book called Secret Warriors. They had like Nick Fury and like some teenage heroes, and he was trying to rebuild S.H.I.E.L.D. and all this sort of thing. And like each issue, Jonathan Hickman would have like a flow chart explaining S.H.I.E.L.D. and this and that. And I'm like, that's stuff I don't even know about, And it's like, wow, this guy's like really into it. And every book he does, he's that into it. Not to dominate the conversation here, Tory, tell us from a female perspective how you got into comics and why you like comics and all that.
Well, I remember being a kid and reading Archie in the checkout lane of the grocery store. And I used to shop up at the Great Escape when I was younger, and I just remember seeing it all around. And when I got to the age to getting a job, I started working at a comic book store, and just being around it and seeing the art, I wanted to be involved in it. And that's one thing I love about comics is you can find any kind of story you're looking for. Like I wasn't too huge into superheroes. I would always love Batman, but it's kind of hard to jump in the middle of a story. So when DC restarted, that's when I jumped right in. I was picking up Batman, Wonder Woman, Aquaman, and they've just been doing so many awesome things. And the thing about comics is, if you don't like one story, you can go into the store and say, I don't like this author, do you have anything else? And you can have just a pick of whatever you want. And there's bound to be a story you'll like. There's always something to be found. That's what I love about it.
Right, samurais,
Oh yeah,
flying ponies, anything, really, in comics.
Yeah, I found a story in a dollar bin called Aerosmith, and it was it was made to like an alternate universe World War II type thing, and the soldiers battle, but they each have their own personal dragon, and there's like flying dolphins near the ships and stuff. I mean, you can have anything you imagine in
Yeah,
comics.
that's
and
Kurt Busiek wrote that, didn't he?
I think so, yeah.
Well, that's like, is anybody reading Saga by Brian K. Vaughan? If you're not reading Saga, you need to read Saga. It is an excellent, excellent book by Image. The first issue is really super hard to get, but when they first come out, they're $2.99, and Brian K. Vaughan specifically put it down where there were no ads. That was the deal, and it's in color, and you get like a $3.99 book for $2.99. But it's excellent. Like there's a spaceship that's made out of a tree, and it's all magic based. It's awesome. There's a leader of this group that's chasing after this man and woman that are from two different races, and they're not supposed to be together. And they've got together and they've had a child, and it's basically the child telling the point. It's from the third person point of view of the baby telling the story of how her parents met. And this dude that's the main villain has a Mac computer for a head.
Yeah.
And it sounds like you're like, that's totally ridiculous. But it does sound ridiculous, but it's very well written. And if you know who Brian K. Vaughan is, of Why the Last Man, that's another great book by
Which
him.
might be another movie coming out at some point.
Which I hope not, because the last book in that series made me cry. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's really sad. But yeah, it's a good book, Brian K. Why the Last Man. And I'm glad to see 100 Bullets again, the Lano one by Brian Azzarello. Anytime he does 100 Bullets, I'll read it. I mean, 100 Bullets has been taught at colleges. It's recommended reading at some universities, and so is Watchmen.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you can go anywhere. Samurais, Lone Wolf and Cub, which, I mean, I don't know if anybody's into the Japanese culture, but that's a good one to check out. You have a question?
No, it's just.
Okay, sorry. I thought you were raising your hand. I'm sorry, man.
See, one thing that's so awesome about comics, I mean, all these things he was describing in Saga, I mean, that's obviously not something you'll see in everyday life. I mean,
Right.
I don't know, I saw a guy look like he had a Commodore head, you know.
I mean, does anyone ever feel like the world's just a little bit too normal? The comics are a really great place to escape that, because if you find the right artist and writer, I mean, you can lose yourselves in these books. Sometimes easier than you can in novels, because they're painting where they are.
Unless they start doing politics in comics, then that kind
Yeah,
of
it's
takes
a
me
little bit
out.
much.
Yeah.
That's
my
mainly
escape.
like in the creator-owned books, and they'll kind of give you a heads up on that. But you know what's cool is like when people that are kind of ignorant about comics, they're like, oh, they still make comics?
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, do you ever watch any TV or movies? Oh, yeah. What movie did you see? Oh, I saw Iron Man. I loved it. Yeah, that's a comic book. Oh, it is? I just kind of want to slap them. Like, how do you not know Iron Man's a comic? Like, what's your favorite shows? I like Big Bang Theory and Walking Dead. Okay, did you know Walking Dead's a comic? Oh, it is? Oh, they're doing a comic off the TV show? No, they're doing a TV show off the comic, you know? So it's finally like people are catching on. I just think if like retailers and the publishers would kind of just, we're like this close to being in a new golden age of comics, I think. You know, where maybe we'll have Western comics and romance comics and superhero stuff. Because like in Japan, they look at it as an adult art form. You know, they have comics that are written towards them, comics that are written towards the kids, and they have stuff in between and some crazy stuff too.
And when they
But,
have
you know.
DVD players, they come with manga instructions on how to hook up your DVD player in Japan. That's cool about their society. They totally embrace this action figure, comic, and if you don't sell like 1 million copies of a book, then they like, oh, that was terrible.
Well, I just discovered a series called 13. It's like a kind of a graphic novel series. It's made by a company called Cinebook.
Thanks for France.
Yeah, it's from France and Belgium. And I was looking up, they have all these different titles. But I'm doing the store order every month, and I'm like, man, the art looks amazing. Like, where is this coming from?
The French are awesome.
Yeah, and like I looked it up, and there was like one of these books when it was originally not 13, but another one of these books from this company. We're just now getting it in the States, but it came out like 5-10 years ago in France and all that. So 500,000 copies. Wow. And I'm just like, wow, that's crazy. It's like DC and Marvel would die to sell 500,000 copies. And it's like, and it's just like a basic story, but the art and the story are so good and so clean, and just it feels like you're you're like reading a movie, if that makes sense.
That's the same with, they did a book called, DC owns, not really the rights, but it's DC and Humanoid Press. And they do a book called Meta Barons. Well, I actually had issues of that before they hit the States because my friend was in the military. He was over in France, and I always told him, anywhere you go, pick me up comics from that area. And he brought me home Meta Barons. Of course, I didn't know what the hell it said on the top of the cover. I mean, it's all in French. I don't read or speak French. But, I mean, the art's beautiful. So, I mean, when it finally did hit here in the States, it was awesome. So I knew what they were saying then. So that's, I mean, it is really cool. Just the different societies that have all of this stuff and have all the comics in that format.
And the great
That's
thing
what's
with,
cool about comics. Comics are awesome, y'all. I love them.
see, we're all smiling and talking about
Right.
it. It's like there's no negative feeling with it, unless Rob Liefeld draws it. But like, watch this. Rob Liefeld's gonna draw Batman.
No.
Okay, see.
You can draw anything else, but
No
not
offense to
Batman.
Rob Liefeld.
Yeah, one ear up like this, and one ear
He's
the
a really nice
batarang
guy,
would be
really
a
nice guy.
boomerang with a bat.
But like when people come into the shop and they like, we kind of do our little sales pitch or whatever. It's like, if you like superhero stuff, Marvel and DC are knocking it out of the park. DC 2 years ago relaunched their universe.
IDW.
Marvel relaunched theirs.
IDW's doing a lot of
Then if
stuff
you,
right
yeah, a company called IDW that I'm really big on, they do a lot of licensed property, and then they do stuff with Stephen King's son Joe Hill, which his stuff's amazing. And then like with the licensed stuff, like I was going to ask him a question, and I guess I'll go ahead and bring it up. Like a book that surprised me, like I like Ninja Turtles. I love Ninja Turtles now. I always liked them, thought they were cool. And IDW was getting a license for it. I was like, well, they did great with G.I. Joe and Transformers and
he's
Star
super
Trek and
excited.
Doctor Who and all this. And so we got him in, and I read the first issue. Like, that's okay, Get the second issue, sold. I reread the first and second one. I think I called him up.
Yeah.
Like, you need to read it. And it's like this really cool story. It's like Kevin Eastman, of course, one of the co-creators. He's involved in it. Peter Laird kind of stepped away from it when they sold everything to Nickelodeon. He kind of, retired or whatnot. But like, we always talk about this series, and anybody that shops in the store and hears me give this pitch, whenever we have the trade in, I order 3 of Volume 1, and we'll sell it every time. Even if I don't have, like, say this gentleman comes in and says, I want to order Volume 1 of Turtles, we'll order 3. He'll get his, and then within a week we'll sell those other 2. And I always tell people, if you don't like it, I will buy it back from you at full price. And they come back, I want Volume 2. And the cool thing is, like, Turtles have been around for God knows how long, 20, 30 years,
Right.
something like that. And they've been done ad nauseum, this and that. And it's like they've taken it, and it's, if you kind of know what the Ninja Turtles are, it makes sense. If you don't know about it, it still makes sense. But they've kind of done it in a way where they're like reincarnations, but somehow they're still these mutated animals, and it's so cool. And it's just like, wow, I never thought they'd ever do something like that. And it's like, that's one of the first books I read when I get home and I bring books home. And usually calling him, calling her, or calling another buddy, messaging on Facebook, did you read Turtles? Oh my God, I can't believe what happened. And it's just like you turn into like a 5-year-old kid, and because you're so excited about it, and it's a good feeling. And that's a book that surprised me here recently. Well, it's like 2 years ago, but what's a book that surprised you guys recently that you thought,
I would say the one that's probably surprised me the most is when it's actually 2 books, and when they came out, number 1 was in my hand, and I was just like, nah, I don't really care. And for both of these books, and he kept telling me how good they were. So I said, all right, I'll make you a deal. When the first trade comes out, I'll pick up the one that has a character I like in it. And I'm talking about Transformers, Robots in Disguise, and More Than Meets the Eye. And I mean, growing up, I collected the toys and I watched the cartoon. Never really read the Marvel comic. I tried to, couldn't really get into it. Didn't like the art because it was always somebody terrible on it, I thought personally. So Robots in Disguise comes in, and I read the first trade, and I'm like, man, this is awesome. Like, super good. And by this time, IDW's up to 150 issues of Transformers. Well, being a collector and a completist, I had to go out and I did a Google search for the first issue of Transformers from IDW, which is Infiltration Zero. So I basically went along and bought all 150 issues, and by the time that trade had come out, it was to issue 12, so I had to scramble. I got all the spotlights. This company got 2 guys on these books and made them fabulous and fun that I went back and hunted down 150 issues to read to know that whole universe.
Like these Transformer books, you could almost take out like the robots and all that and place it like in a modern day America with the way the characters interact and what's going on. If you take out the war and all that jazz.
Yeah,
And it's like, it's amazing. They've actually given personalities and made these characters seem lifelike, you know. And the one he's talking about, it's like all this like political intrigue and
very good.
sabotage and all this stuff.
Doesn't deal with the Earth at all, anything. Really good book. So it's Batman gets read first, then Transformers. Any spotlight or robots in disguise, when they come in, automatically read. That's a good catch with comics.
Doesn't Brian Azzarello also write Jonah Hex?
Brian, I don't know if he does.
I don't think he does, unless it's something recent.
Is it? I don't know if he's doing All-Star Western, because that's the only one I know that Jonah Hex is in.
Azzarello just writes a Wonder Woman in the 100
Bullets.
Yeah, Brother Lono.
Yeah.
Tori, what's a book that surprised you recently?
2 books actually. I picked up Hawkeye when it restarted, and I'm not big on Marvel. I don't know, something about the universe just doesn't strike me. But I mean, I picked up Hawkeye, and it's something I look forward to every month now. It's a cheap book, but the art in it is amazing, and it's kind of dealing with Hawkeye in everyday life, like, you know, in his apartment and his neighbors, and you know what it's like being an Avenger day to day. It's been really good. Another one that surprised me was Animal Man. When DC restarted, they brought him back. They haven't had him out since the 80s. And he sounded kind of campy to me. He can take on, you know, any power of an animal close to him. And I mean, it's been amazing because they kind of tied it in with Swamp Thing recently. And there's like a rot world, and it's controlled by the green, the red, and the rot. And Animal Man is an avatar of the red, and it's just following him in his everyday life and dealing with, they just got over the rot world, so it's starting a new storyline now, and I mean, it's another one that I look forward to every month.
Star Wars, too, by Brian Wood.
Yeah, in case you guys don't know, the Dark Horse put out a new Star Wars book that takes place between A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back, and Brian Wood writes it. He's a really good writer, and Marvel is going to reacquire the Star Wars rights vis-a-vis Disney. I think either next year or at least by 2015, before the new movie comes out. And he'll probably stay on it because he does two, 3 books for Marvel already. And they announced it a couple months ago, but it's in the current previews. So if you go to a comic shop or look it up online, the Dark Horse is adapting George Lucas's original screenplay for Star Wars. It's going to be an 8-issue miniseries where like Han Solo's a lizard, and I don't remember what Chewbacca was supposed to be, but there's like a General Star Killer, and it looks really, really cool. The writer, I guess, met with Lucas and got access to his hidden secret notes, and
Go to Tashi Station.
Yeah.
Some power converter.
yeah, but he got all that stuff, and they're going to make it into a 8-issue comic. You know, so that's pretty fun. Well, do you guys have any questions or comments, or you know?
I will never forgive Jeff Johns for making Superboy Prime and Alexander Luthor go bad.
Yeah, but you gotta like how Alexander Luthor went out.
Yeah.
He didn't invite the Joker to a party. He always invite the Joker to a party. Yes, ma'am.
How do you guys feel about graphic novels that have less of a fantastic element, like a Fun House or a Kite Runner, that are based in the real world, that are sort of biographies or autobiographies?
I enjoy those. I've read some like that. What is one I read recently? I mean, I've got shelves at home full of this stuff. I cannot remember.
I personally think anything in this art form is good.
Yeah.
You know, if it's I know they're getting ready to come out with a book for Congressman Lewis from I think he's a representative from Georgia. So, what's that?
South Carolina.
South Carolina. Thank you. Close. You know, where it details his struggle in the civil rights movement and his rise from poverty and how black folks are treated in the South back in the day. Now he's a congressman in the United States Congress. So they're putting that in a graphic novel. There was a book about Martin Luther King they put in graphic novel. I mean, just cool stuff like that. I think anything like that, you know, it's something you'd want to have, read, and put in your bookshelf, you know, and also for kids to read. You know, it's a great way for kids to read.
And I mean, a lot of times it's a lot easier to read an autobiography about somebody if they have pictures and the written word, just because not that it's a quicker read, but you get a better feel for it. Like after 9/11, they put out the whole 9/11 report in a graphic novel, so you could read everything time-wise as what was going on, and then they gave you the back history. So that was really good because I think the actual book is like over 1,000 pages.
Oh, it's something ridiculous.
It's something crazy like that. So that was a good way to be able to read it. And then I don't know, you get there's some that I've read that have been really interesting, some that have been boring, some that have like scared me.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had books that have actually scared me. And Alan Moore's From Hell, that book scared me. Like I literally had all the individuals and got halfway through it because when you read the books, when you get to the back, there's like 2 or 3 pages that are appendices, and he tells you panel for panel what he's doing with the writer, who this person is in the panel, what's going on, the maps of the city, where he went to get his information, what books he read, and like by halfway through the book, like I was scared because of some of the stuff he read, and like these are the actual people and how they were acting. Like I had to put the book down for like a couple of months before I go back to it. And I mean, that's a power of a comic too, or a power of a book.
Well, if you think about artwork, just you go to a museum and look at artwork, it's powerful. It images and it produces thoughts, and you think about it, you might have a favorite piece of artwork. So imagine if you take all your favorite pieces of artwork and put it into a story. That's exactly what comics are. And throughout history, back in the Egyptian times, they didn't call them comics, but they drew on the walls. They told their story in pictures. Yeah, they could speak, they could read, they could have writings too, but it's just another form of art, another art form.
Mayans did too. It was
Yeah.
all picture forms.
Do any of you enjoy the work of the late Harvey Pekar?
Yes. American Splendor?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's a nice, I like fantasy-oriented stuff, but American Splendor is a nice change of pace from the fantasy-oriented stuff.
Well, right, and it's also, you look at the way he's describing his life, and it kind of can help you laugh at certain things in your life from what he's done in his life. Another one is, I don't know if you're familiar with a writer named Joe Matt. He did a book called That Poor Bastard, and he did another one called Peep Show. But it's just all about this guy's life, and he's living in an apartment. He doesn't really want to work, but he draws comics and he collects the Viewmaster slide reels. Totally terrible with women. Cannot talk to women until he's like, "Oh, check out my new Viewmasters," and they like all freak out. And then he talks about like,
Yeah, if you're single, don't do that.
yeah, don't do that to him at all.
Don't do that.
But he'd go into his bathroom, and instead of using the toilet, he'd pee in the sink because it was some kind of habit that he had. So he broke down his whole life for you, and by the end of those books, you're like, yeah, I'm number one.
Oh, it was autobiographical.
Yes, absolutely. Very good books, though. I have all of them. Very good stuff. I mean, man's not afraid to pick apart his life. He, at one point, was trying to work for Disney, and they wouldn't hire him, but they hired his fiance, and then he was all upset about that because she was making the money, but he didn't want to really work a job, and he got mad because she was making money, he wasn't making any, and he wanted her to quit. It's just stuff like that you deal with, like how weird couples can be sometimes. It's really that stuff is just really good.
Going back to this young lady's question, I almost wish they would do more stuff like that.
True.
Yeah.
Because I'm a big
Most
history buff, and I've got books on the Revolutionary War, and I've loved that time period since I was a little kid, which was only a couple years ago.
And I'm a big World War II buff.
Oh, me too.
And
That
so
too.
anything World War II I can get my hands on.
Thank God Captain America helped beat the Nazis.
That's
That
right.
really happened. That was
Right.
true.
So I go looking for like weird war stories and stuff like old World War II comics and stuff like that. But I wish they would do, and they've done one that was Dave Sim that did Cerebus. He did one about Auschwitz, which was really good too.
We had a regular come in one time with a Batman #6, and I mean this thing was awesome looking. I mean he was just like his pride of his collection, Ryan.
Yeah.
And we were like looking through it, and they had like almanacs, American history, and they used to put all this extra stuff in comics. And it's just like, man, I wish they would do stuff like that now. I've got old comics that've got like, tired of getting picked on at the beach, drink this for me, still kind of wondering if I should send off for one of those and see what happens.
The X-ray
But,
glasses.
Yeah, the X-ray glasses.
They don't work.
Sell somebody of these, and you can get points to get these little toys.
Right.
But yeah, I wish they would do more stuff like that. Like you think like 300, the movie and the graphic novel, a little exaggerated maybe, but yeah, it's still kind of cool though. It's that battle and that time period and that, you know, that sort of thing. I'd love to see them do more stuff like that too. In addition to, you know, the Turtles or Captain America or Batman, there's just it's like a big pie that can always expand. You know. Any other questions in the audience or comments?
I was really kind of baffled by the recent Superman Unchained film, which is odd because I'm usually pleased with Bruce Timm's work and I don't really like Jeff Johns. So I was wondering if they really just deviated from the comic art and botched it up.
As much as I love Jeff Johns, I think his best strength is in comics and not to mess with other media forms.
Right.
I kind of blame part of the Green Lantern movie on that.
Yeah.
And then also, like, I no offense against Smallville, I've never really watched it.
Good show.
I've heard great things about it. I tried to watch, I guess it was 2 episodes that Jeff Johns wrote, and it lost me, you know, right away. And I didn't even get to like Clark or any of those characters. And I think the problem with some writers, and again, no disrespect against Johns, is I love his work, and I'm sad he's off Green Lantern, and love his Justice League stuff and all his other stuff. But I think sometimes they overestimate, like, the Green Lantern movie. You know, do we really need to have Parallax and all the core and all that sort of thing in it? Or should we have had this human story about this guy that gets this crazy power and can do things and deal with stuff that we can understand, and then you kind of later on branch off on all the crazy stuff? Well, I think he kind of thought, oh, everybody knows who these people are. Well, no, they don't. As much as he knows who Batman is, or I know who Iron Man is, or she knows who Superman is or whatnot, and I said that just because you don't like him. I want to be told on the big screen who these characters are. Like, yeah, we all know who Tony Stark is, but we were told in the movies.
It's got to make
Bruce
sense.
Wayne or Clark Kent or whatnot.
Yeah.
It's got to make sense to a point.
I think
even
some
if
of the
you're a
writers,
fan.
they kind of they miss that, and I think that with the animation, I think that was just probably a miss shot, you know.
Yeah, it's just kind of oddly slapped together considering how pleasing the DC animated films have been for years now. But yeah, the Green Lantern movie too, he wasn't on Earth enough.
Right.
I don't even think that. I don't even claim that planet
Yeah.
as being Earth. They're just so weird.
Yeah, it's once again, if you're getting into origin story, if you want to break it down, the original Superman movie, fabulous origin story, great. Batman Begins, great origin story. The Crow, great origin story. It's when you start going, well, we could put this character here, or we could put this character here, and we could do this over here. And if you just notice him, that'll be a subplot for something later if we do a third film.
And the Crow will fight 15 villains.
Right. And they just pile it on, and it gets too much. Sometimes there is too much. And, you know, if you...
Crow's another example, not to interrupt you, but say, you like, what, you know, oh, I love the Crow. That's a comic book.
Right.
Oh, what it is? Yeah, Superman was a comic. If somebody ever says they didn't know Superman was a comic,
Something's wrong.
you should probably get a medical help. You know, seek a doctor.
Yeah, and if you have seen the Crow film and haven't read the book, read the book, because the book is excellent.
And you know, like growing up, I was mainly like Marvel and Batman, and I didn't really get too much into the DC stuff. Now I did when Johns got on Green Lantern, but the Justice League cartoon it was only discovering comics again. I was like, wow, there's all these cool characters. I should be reading both. And, you know, and I do, and now I'm poor, you know.
Right, exactly. And it just like when you had Batman come out and Batman Returns, and then it wasn't too long around there that you had Batman the Animated Series, which is the definitive Batman for a lot of people, me included. And I was reading Batman comics before all that, but that's every one of those episodes is a comic book.
And the cool thing about that show won Emmys. And we were talking about the other day in the shop, like with the exception of the Joker, when you were introduced to like Two-Face or Riddler, you actually felt sorry for those guys. If only they had turned left instead of right, maybe they wouldn't have gotten to crime and all that. But it's like, especially Mr. Freeze. I mean,
right.
Good Lord, that little story arc. It's like, man, you feel bad for him, you know.
Or when
it's like Batman cut him a break.
Or when Harley Quinn got out of jail and had the whole misunderstanding with the dress. And he hands her the dress at the end, and she was like, why are you doing this? I had a bad day once too. And that was it. That's his whole mentality is these people could do so much good if their life hadn't changed right here at this specific time.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I guess Batman's origin is too violent to have actually been an episode of Batman the Animated Series.
I would say they probably didn't want to deal with it too much. They just dealt with more of the flashbacks. You know, he was a kid, found the cave, His parents got shot, and then he went off and trained. Because originally, when all this happened in the original, that he never went off for 7 years and trained. You know, Bat just broke through the glass. I'm going to be Batman. You know, and then Frank Miller kind of added that in later, which makes more sense because he's gone and trained to the peak of human perfection, as close as he can get anyway. So
it's kind of funny how these characters evolved because Superman used to slap pimps, throw people off buildings.
Right.
Batman he had a gun.
Batman used to shoot people. Wow.
He'd put them down, hop in that cool car and drive off. You know.
Well, in a TV series that a lot of kids were watching, I'm sure a lot of adults were watching it too. I guess they just didn't want to show Bruce Wayne's parents getting shot.
Right.
It's kind of implied in the opening, I think, in one of the openings for the series. But then again, too, you know, you had the two-parter for the Tony Zuko episodes.
Yeah.
That showed how Dick Grayson lost his family, and I turned 20 at the end of the year. As a 19-year-old guy, add 20 to that actually. I still choke up watching those episodes because they're touching. I mean, I want to say that those are one of the episodes that got nominated.
Yeah.
If he would know better than me. But
yeah, that's one of them. And I mean, even though when they sat down just to get that show, all they had was the beginning, like cartoon work. When you see the opening, that's what they showed, and they were like, "You do that cartoon." They're like, "Really?" It's like, "Yeah." And then they brought in this Japanese artist that, not in the later stuff of the animated series, but in the beginning, it's all this. It's mainly done with charcoals, but it's all these screens, and they give you the title. Well, they had this. He was like 65, elderly Japanese guy that was big over in Japan doing cartoon work. They brought him over just specifically to do those opening things, and he designed some of the style of Gotham City and everything. So that's pretty cool, like how even a comic book can affect a cartoon that can affect a whole bunch of people's lives. So it all stems from comic books.
And if you had to guess, who do you think Christopher Nolan, what was his inspiration besides a couple of the graphic novels and eras of Batman? Like, do you think he looked at Batman and Robin, the movie, and said, I'm going to base Begins and Dark Knight off of that, or, ooh, the animated series, that's kind of dark and edgy. And,
right.
You know, I think he went with the latter, you know?
And see, all of these shows and movies are a great way to bridge comics, or bridge kids from watching TV to reading comics. Because, you know, I like Batman and the Justice League. Well, they've got a Justice League comic for kids. And the TMNT Adventures show is about to start. They've also got a comic coming out with it. And there's a Superman Family Adventures comic going on. And Marvel's putting out Ultimate Superman. It's a really good way to get kids into reading.
Sorry.
Well,
that'd be a big news, breaking news
Yeah.
in Derby City Comic Con. Marvel took over Superman.
No.
when my nephew was little, he really liked the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles animated series, and he liked. He for a while he liked Batman. And I was thinking he liked something else but I wasn't able to convert him into a fan of the comic books. I'm sorry.
Well, there's a couple ways you can do that. Like I actually,
All right.
brainwash.
Here's how the mind control starts.
Turn off the cameras and all that. Like my nephew, he's 7, 8 now, I think. Well, when he was 4, it was at Christmas. They had the Batman Brave and the Bold cartoon was on. And there was this really cool Batmobile came with Batman and I think Clock King. And I had Clock King, and I bought it for him, shipped it down to him. And he had like train sets and just all the 200 toys he got for Christmas. And my wife went down to spend Christmas with our in-laws, and she was like, he had all these toys, and the only thing he played with was that Batmobile. And I was just like, yes. And Uncle Dan, you want to play Star Wars Legos? You tell me about Captain America. Tell me about Spider-Man. That sort of thing. And then like we have a regular that's got 2 boys, and he's a big G.I. Joe fan. And he's like, man, I just can't get my sons into G.I. Joe. They think the cartoon's lame or this and that. And like, well, sure they're your sons, first. But all joking aside, and so the way you do it is that you just you got to be excited about stuff, and you can't push it on them. Either they're going to be naturally inclined to it, or they're going to grow to like it, or maybe they just won't like it at all. So I said, here's what you do. I said, you got a basement? I said, yeah. I said, go down to your basement and watch some of the G.I. Joe cartoons. Where are you going, Dad? Don't worry about it. You guys aren't cool enough for this. And you go downstairs like, oh my God, that's so cool. It's so funny. Ha ha. And you come upstairs and you get your drink and you're like, hey, see you guys. And what's so funny and cool, Dad? Don't worry about it. You're a lame. You wouldn't get it. And you go down and watch it. And then like they'll sneak down there and they're like, this is damn G.I. Joe things Dad was talking about. And they'll say, oh, those are pretty cool. So after about 2 months of him doing this, he came in the shop. He says, thanks. I said, for what? He said, my sons love G.I. Joe. I think they like it more than I do. And I was like, high five, saved another one,
Now I remember he really liked DuckTales, but I couldn't get him into Carl Barks. Although, frankly, I know Carl Barks was a very talented man. I'm not the world's biggest fan of Donald Duck and Uncle Scrooge, but...
Well, you got to like the life and times of, well, I don't say you got to, but Carl Barks did a Life and Times of Uncle Scrooge, which actually has the Galt House in it, and that has the ferry boat.
Yeah.
That's in it as well. So he covers Kentucky in it pretty good. Louisville's actually in part of the book.
I'm a Hoosier.
We're sorry.
Oh, really?
Hey,
Just teasing.
it's okay. I'm German. It's all good. No, but with the Power Comics, he mentioned Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So, being a guy that likes comics, I of course watched the cartoons. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and I never read the Eastman and Laird stuff before that. I went back later and read it, and I was like, wow, this is really cool. They just kill people. They don't play around. But watching the cartoon, I was introduced to Usagi Yojimbo, which is the rabbit.
Yeah.
Once again, the Power comic books, I was like, that's a cool character. And then a friend of mine was like, well, he's a comic book character. I didn't even know that. So I was introduced to that and went and got the graphic novels that I could get a hold of. And I still read the book. It's still going. That's a good one. Another one is, he was talking about G.I. Joe. I was reading G.I. Joe in Washington State in Nia Bay on McCaw Air Force Base. And that was the first time I was ever introduced to a ninja. Didn't know what a ninja was, other than they were cool. And they had swords and they was just whipping up on everybody, throwing ninja stuff. I was like, these are great. So I went to a library, looked up everything I could on a ninja, got introduced to samurai, and got introduced to the Japanese culture through an American comic book, and loved stuff about samurais and loved stuff about ninja. Went and took sword training with a samurai sword, all because loving it from a comic.
You brought up DuckTales. I got a funny DuckTales story. I'd watch it with my little sister and brother, and I loved it. I thought this is cool. And I was like in 8th grade at the time. They were like,
Launchpad and Quack.
Yeah. They're like kindergarten, pre-K, whatever. And I'm watching it, and I'm like, man, this is so cool. So I go to school, and I wanted so badly talk. Like all the girls sit here, all the guys sit here. And I'm sitting there, and I'm like, if I bring up DuckTales, they'll kick my butt, because they're like, what are you watching a kid's show? And I was like, I'm just dying to talk to somebody about it. And I think it was like that Friday or that Thursday, and there was like a 2-parter or a 3-parter or something. I heard somebody say Launchpad. I said, "You talking about Launchpad McQuack?" And they were like, yeah, like I was going to pick on them or something. I was, you talking about DuckTales? I was like, yeah, that's what we're all talking about. Oh, sweet, yeah, DuckTales is awesome. And like every day at school, we'd all talk about DuckTales. That was a cool series, a very fun series.
Anybody got any series that they're reading currently that they think is awesome, great?
Jonah Hex.
Jonah Hex. I read some of the last of the Jonah Hex stuff, but I haven't been reading any of the new. You talk about the All-Star Western stuff?
Well, yeah, but I like the series he had right before All-Star Western, and I like the older issues of Jonah Hex.
Oh
too.
yeah.
I really like the character Batlash, another Western character.
Right. I like Jonah Hex. Jonah Hex is an awesome character. The All-Star Western, that one's really good. And I read the earlier stuff of the Jonah Hex by, was it Gray and Palmiotti, weren't they the main writers on it?
They wrote it for a while.
And that's one book that initially I had to drop off on. Sorry, but after you get 30 or 40 books every couple of weeks, it gets a toll on you after a while.
Financially?
Yes, absolutely.
Just gotta take a break.
Yeah, you gotta get a break from it. And I think a lot of it, if you take a break from it, you get that hunter feel too. Like because I always like looking for series. So coming to conventions, I love going and looking through the comic bins, especially the 50-cent and dollar bins. That's like,
It's like gold hunting.
that's money right through there. Because I guarantee you, I probably bought 5 or 6 books today that they had $1 on it, and I know they're probably some are $16, $15 a piece. And I mean, they either didn't know what they had or they were just trying to
Unload.
yeah.
Yeah.
Get rid of
I'll go to
stuff.
conventions and look through back issue bins, and I have my list and I get made fun of. My wife and our immediate friends. I'll be like, get your list, and I'll be like,
I got my list already.
My list is down here in my purse.
There's one. And I got a phone too. I should be typing all this stuff on my phone. There's the other one. There's one. Got soda spilled all over it. Blotched through. I was carrying this.
It's really-
It's just a lot of fun. I mean, I can go into, any of the 4 or 5 different comic stores in this area and be able to probably talk to anyone in the store about whatever they're reading and, just, oh, what's that about? Who's in it? Who's writing it? That type of thing. And I mean, I could do that here or anywhere in America because, it's a universal thing. And it's really nice to be able to talk to people that you don't know and just have these really awesome conversations about things you're both interested in and even possibly find out about things that you don't know about. I mean, just from talking to customers, I've picked up some different Marvel stuff, like Avengers Arena. It's
Great
about
book.
something completely different than I thought it was. And,
Great book.
I mean, yeah, that's what I've been hearing. So, I mean, just from talking to customers about it, I want to read it. And, you go into these stores and you talk to people and, I mean, you just find out about all these awesome stories and you get into it and you want to just read it. You just want to read them all.
there's a really nice guy out in the floor, Alex Wilson. If you go to the Louisville Cartoon Society booth, he's from the UK. And he'll come in and we'll talk. And I love hearing his accent.
Yeah,
It's so
he's cool,
cool.
dude.
But he's all into comics. So here's a guy from another country, another continent, and he's awesome artist. So definitely go check his booth out.
Just working in a comic book shop over the years, I've sat and I can have a conversation about a comic where I've had somebody call me a bitch or turn around and give me a high five just because like Batman stomps. So it's like, what about it, man? You're over there high-fiving a guy and you're just talking about a comic book. But it's still cool, Or the one was I was talking about Starscream one day. I was like, oh, that's my boy. It's like, yeah, but he's a backstabber.
There's your girl.
That's her. That's what I thought it was. And she walked by and said, well, Starscream's a bitch. And we're walking out. I was heading left. And I was like, okay.
She came back in and clarified what she meant.
I mean, I wasn't mad. I was just like, I wish she'd have explained why he was a bitch. I mean, he is.
That's his redeeming qualities, though. Like, he will never not be that whiny little bitch.
Right, exactly.
He will just never.
Right,
lie.
he's a
She definitely
backstabber.
comes back.
Definitely read Transformers Robots in Disguise then.
Yeah, because that's all him.
He just pulled a little move on everybody.
Well, that's surprising.
And took over Cybertron.
Finally. Got his way.
Right, he got his way.
For like a day? Or was it
It'll be a little bit. They kind of, when they did a Megatron spotlight, he told him, he's like, I keep you alive. I don't kill you because you're pathetic.
Is
And,
that part of the All Hail Megatron?
no, it's just a Megatron spotlight.
Oh.
I
And
think
he's
it
beating
takes
him up
place
the whole
between one of
time and
those
just
issues
calling him
or
a
something.
punk the whole time. And it's really good. It kind of, you see their relationship a lot better in that, because he's telling him, why don't you just kill me and get this over with? Because I want to watch you suffer. I want you to be under my boot heel. You are my lackey.
It's completely random, but my little nephew, he's 7 years old. He watched all the, Michael Bay films, which I kind of winced at, but that's just me. And he got really into, Transformers, so I played some, Xbox games with him, and then he found my, old school box sets of the old cartoons and everything. So he and I would sit around, on his Saturdays and stuff and just watch it. And I mean, he would just cackle at everything Starscream did.
Right.
And I'm cackling with him. His mom comes home, like, what are you two doing? I'm like, nothing. Don't worry about it. And, he actually called me. He's like, Aunt Kiki, what's the big purple robot's name? I'm like, Shockwave, honey. He goes to any Target, any place, sees Transformers. He has to make his mom call me to remind him which ones he likes. Because, they all look so different from, the games and the movies and everything. And,
Right.
I went and saw the Michael Bay, the last one, I can't remember what it's called, and, Shockwave is in, or not Shockwave, Soundwave is, the satellite sound.
Right.
Or not the last, I don't know. But, he's like, wait, isn't that the blue one that gets really small with the little ones that come out of the chest? And I'm like, how do I explain this to you?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, that's just, he's 7 years old and he knows, where he's learning so much more about Transformers just because he likes the, childish cartoons.
Right,
And,
the old cartoons.
Transformers Prime he loves and animated and everything. He's like, is that SpongeBob? I'm like, yeah. But, just, that was kind of fun for me because, stuff that I am embarrassed watching. I'm like, I can watch it with him and get away with it.
Right.
That was fun.
Right.
I tried to explain what Cobra Law was to my nephew. I started watching the G.I. Joe animated movie, and I said, well, wait till you're a little bit older and I'll explain that one to you. Because I don't think I quite understand either.
Nobody does.
Yeah, it's kind of weird, cool. But well, if anybody has any more questions or whatnot, if not, we'll go ahead and wrap up. Just keep reading comics and tell your friends about them. Let's keep growing the business and keep passing it on to other generations.
Yeah, and just hit quarter bins at places. If there's people that, you know, especially kids, just to hand out comics. Because I know in where I'm at, the area that I live out in Henry County, so I'm about an hour away from here, but that whole area, it's kind of really bad with drugs now. Kind of, I don't want to be like on a down note, but it's just a bad area, and a lot of parents.
Thanks, Speedy.
Right. Right, exactly. A lot of kids running around, nothing to do, but they all got like cell phones and stuff, and so I try to put a book in their face and just like, here, read this, whatever.
They'll pull him over like a cop. He's telling me stories.
Yeah.
I think you can get arrested for doing that.
Yeah,
They'll pull
right.
him over and stop him and like, oh, we won't bust you for speeding and all that. Just here, read a comic.
Right. Here, read this, and I won't.
That's kind of an extreme way to get people into it. So let's
Right.
not quite go that route yet.
But no, like, just hit quarter and dollar bins, or even if you don't. But I mean, at the end of the day, if you spend $1 and get them 4 comics that you can just give to a kid that can be introduced to it.
Or an adult.
Because we didn't, like when I was younger, we didn't have, well, we had Great Escape, but not really much anything else.
Yeah, back in the day,
Convenient.
yeah, convenient stores, now
pharmacies.
Dairy Mart or
Yeah.
Dairy Queen, whatever it was.
Yeah, Walgreens, that's where we got our comics. I had to go to 3 different places to just get what came out on Wednesday so I'd have everything. And now you can go like to just a comic book shop and go in there and be like, hey, do you have this issue? No, but I can order it for you. And we can do that too.
Oh, yeah.
Back in the day, you just kind of, no.
Yeah, they've also, about 10 years ago, I think it is, they started re-releasing a lot of the old comics in graphic novels, like Marvel Masterworks and what's it, the DC Classics.
Mhm.
Like, they're doing Flash, Green Lantern, Batman, Superman, and they're reprinting them all in chronological order in trade paperbacks. And I think that's so fantastic because you get to see the classic art, the old characters, and where they came from. And it's been a lot of fun because some of those old stories, they have, you know, the crazier bad guys, and you know, you got the campier heroes, and they're a lot of fun.
But also remember, if you're reading a comic you don't like, you should put that down and try something different. Because that's the only way it's going to change. That's a big argument we have is like, if you keep going, you know, it's a collector mentality. Well, I don't have 22 and 23, but I got 24 and 25. But if you keep getting a book because of you've gotten it so long, because I did that for a while. Well, I've been getting this ever since I was such and such, you know, this old, and it's part of my collection. And it felt like an obligation that you should buy it because you've read it so long. But if it's not any good, man, put that crap down. There's all kinds of good stuff out there. He can tell you, she can tell you, I can tell you. You can get online and do a search. Hey, what's good?
Yeah, if you don't like a comic now, you stop it and pick it up 6 issues later, it might be a new artist,
Awesome.
new writer, and you love it from then on.
Right.
Another thing that we always recommend in closing is if, like, say you know somebody getting back into it, or somebody, I used to read comics when I was little, and I thought about maybe checking them out because I like the movies or whatnot. Well, what'd you read? All right, like Batman, Spider-Man, say G.I. Joe. Okay, we'll go into a shop. Yeah, check out those books. You know, get those 3 because a lot of people want to go in and just buy everything. You know, but which is great. We appreciate that, but at the same time, I'd rather have you long term than short term. And you get burned out because you're like, oh my God, I can't keep up with it all. And so I always say, go with what you know, and then get one that you don't know about. So say the aforementioned person gets Spider-Man, Batman, and G.I. Joe, and they're like, you know, I like, and they pick up Aquaman. You know, and they're like, G.I. Joe and Batman I liked, and didn't like the Doc Ock of Spidey. Aquaman was okay, so now I'm going to get Batman and G.I. Joe definitely. Now I'm going to try Turtles and maybe the Avengers or Saga. I love Saga and Turtles.
Or, yeah.
Now I'm going to get this one, and then you kind of slowly build up from there.
Or if you like just fantasy, or you like true crime, or you know, sci-fi. There's
You're
just
a fan of video games.
Yeah.
Video games.
I mean, there's anywhere you can go in comics. That's one of the greatest things about comics. If you're bored reading comics, then
You're not looking hard enough.
yeah,
You're not reading the right books.
Yeah, you're not reading the right thing. Most definitely.
There's something for everyone, always.
Always.
Well, thank you, folks.
Yes, thank you
Appreciate
for
it.
your time.